So it's been a couple of months since the ProVS Mini was released, bringing vector synthesis to a whole new audience. And understandably, there have been some questions like, how in the heck do I even program this thing? No worries, we're going to answer that in this video, and we'll get you making inspiring sounds on the ProVS Mini or the Victor module in no time. Let's get into it. So obviously, when diving in to create a patch on the ProVS Mini or Victor module, the first thing you're going to want to do is dial in the wave shapes on each oscillator from the oscillator menu section. And you have a massive list to choose from here with all kinds of weird and wonderful wave shapes and tones available, with 128 in total to choose from. So let's look at a simple way of visualizing how vector synthesis works. So imagine you have a square room, and in each corner of the room there's a speaker, each playing a different tone. Let's call them A, B, C and D. Then imagine in the middle of the room you're standing with an omnidirectional microphone. So whatever different point you stand in the room will result in a different mix of those tones coming out the four speakers. So as you've obviously guessed, the speakers here represent the four oscillators playing their own wave shapes, and the microphone represents the joystick, with each position it sits in representing a vector point. Now moving on from that, let's talk about the vector envelopes, aka mix envelopes, which is where I think there was some confusion on the topic for some. So let's say our microphone holding dude here puts 5 markers on the floor, each one representing its own vector point. Let's number them 0 to 4. So then when he starts to walk across the room to each of these points, the sound the mic picks up is obviously going to change and morph as you walk through the path. So if you look at your ProVS Mini or Victor module, if you go to the mix envelope section, you can see that each of the 5 markers we labeled 0 to 5 here on the left screen represent a mix envelope point. So here we're on point 0, and if we move the joystick, you can see the coordinates changing on the display. So we can go ahead and set up different values for each of those 5 points. Okay, so now that that's done, you'll see the next screen with parameters labeled R1, R2, R3 and R4, with a number from 0 to 99 below each. So what this represents is the measurement of time or rate it takes to morph between each point, with 0 being the shortest time value and obviously 99 being the longest. Okay, so now let's put that into practice and demonstrate a patch. So I've got 4 distinct waveforms here set to each oscillator. So let's set up the 5 mix envelope points, and I'll go to the extremities so we can clearly hear each oscillator. Now just take note, on vector point 4, I put that one in the middle of the axis. We'll discuss that soon. Okay, so now we can set the rate of each morph between the vector points. Now I'll play some notes on the keyboard here, and you'll notice that when all the rates are set to 0, we'll only hear vector point 0 playing, which we'd set to oscillator A. So if we now set a short morph rate on R1, you'll hear that now the tone ends on vector point 1, which is set to oscillator B. Okay, so you get the idea. In order to reach the next vector point, you need to set a rate above 0. Now I'll play with some different rate lengths here to demonstrate the different impacts on the timbre it can have. Okay, so next let's bring in vector point 2, and then after that I'll bring in vector point 3. Okay, so let's talk about vector point 4, which we'd set to the middle of the axis, if you remember. So obviously when you hit and hold the note, it goes from vector point 0 to vector point 3, or R1 to R3. Obviously, as long as you have those rates turned above 0. So it won't go to vector point 4 or R4 whilst you're holding the note. It will only activate on the release of the note. So let's demonstrate that. Okay, so this video is getting fairly long now, but that's fine. Just one last quick bit to cover, and that is the looping modes, which will be pretty self-explanatory now that we understand the vector envelopes. And it's always nice to have a graphic illustration as we listen to it, which took me ages to animate, guys, so let me know in the comments if you found it helpful. I hope so. And big thanks to Luigi, head of the synth department, for his very insightful analogy suggestion for the speaker room and microphone scenario. So as you can see here, we have the mix envelope loop screen currently set to off. So let's take a look at the first option, mix envelope loop 0 to 3. So very self-evident here, this will loop between vector point 0 and 3 whilst you hold the note. And if you look closely at the screen, you'll see the arrow denotes the direction of the loop. Then you have an option for 1 to 3 and also 2 to 3. Then you have the reverse loop modes as denoted by the 2 arrows on the screen. And again, you have 0 to 3, 1 to 3 and 2 to 3. And then the last screen, you have the option to set a continuous loop or any amount of loops from 1 to 7.